y'all? Are you not ready to be done with today? Yes. It's a long day. I'm ready to be done with today. And the unfortunate part is that they put ethics at the very end. Right?
It is on purpose. They did. I'm sure.
Welcome to our ethics class. So what we're going to cover in here, we are going to cover ethics, we are going to talk about ethics, but they also wanted me to talk about family peer support and what family peer support looks like that's different than adult peer support. So we're going to go over that really quick, just what family peer support is and the way it might look different than adult peer support. Okay, so family peer support outcomes. So this is from SAMHSA. Family peer supports increased self-efficacy through improving family support services and increasing family member confidence to care for their child. It decreased internalized blame by providing education and connections with others and reframing stigmatizing myths about mental health. It increased empowerment to take action through navigation skills learned through FPSS, empowers families to become active participants in their child's services, and it decreases family member isolation through assisting family members with identifying and accessing community and natural supports that help families feel less alone. So as I was listening today to all the people who spoke, Megan and the awardees who were presented awards, I was listening to them talk and I'm like, if they just had a family peer support, right? Like if they had that support as they were raising their kids and learning through the crises, like imagine the self-efficacy that could have happened, the decreasing of internalizing blame. Like, that is huge. Internalizing blame is huge across peer support, across the board, right? With parents, it kind of digs just a little bit deeper, right? I had to tell my mom all the time, you know, Mom, my actions don't reflect your ability to parent. My actions are my actions, and they don't reflect on you. And that was a big thing that I had to learn as I was parenting my kids, is that their actions are their actions. I get to support and help how I want, but those are their choices. And it doesn't reflect my ability as a parent. Increasing empowerment to take action. Like when you have that person there to support you, when your child has an IEP or they have like a 504 at the school, but they don't know how to have those conversations with the school and they need to advocate for their child, but they don't know how, having somebody that's been there, that's done that, to sit by their side and just be like, okay, this is what it looks like, this is how it goes. And you empower them to pretty soon learn how to do that on their own. And then pretty soon they're going to those meetings and they're advocating for their child, which in turn helps the child, right? And decreasing family member isolation. Sometimes we feel so alone. We can be surrounded by people, but we feel alone inside our own families. And when, as peers, as family peers, when we come in and we work with the whole family, we get to teach them how to work together as a team. And it's a beautiful, beautiful process to watch, and to watch families go from feeling completely alone in the situations that they're in to now feeling empowered and together and they want to spend their time together. It is absolutely beautiful. So a family system in Webster, it's a collective body of persons who live in one house and under one head or manager. So family systems look different, like everywhere you turn, right? Every family system does not look the same. Different cultures have different family makeups. Each member of the family influences the family culture, and each member of the family typically has a specific role. So, what are some types? Let's just throw out some types really quick of different family systems that you see in our community.
Foster families, step families.
Big brother, big sister.
Yep. Maybe grandparents, single parents. Maybe some kids have two moms or two dads.
Married children.
Yep. Married children. Some cultures bring everybody, right? We want the kids, we want the parents, we want the grandparents, the great grandparents. We want everybody. And that's how they live. That's their family system. And so it's important to understand that every family system is different. And so what works for one family is not going to work for another family. Just like adult peer support, right? What works for one person, an individual, isn't going to work the same for another one. So as a family peer support, we work with an identified youth. So we have a youth that may be struggling with drugs or mental health or whatever it is. That's the identified youth, and that's who our work, as we work with the family, our work is focused on that individual. But just because it's focused on that individual doesn't mean that's the only person that we're working with. As we do our notes and documentation, we will write the notes. So I worked with Clay. Okay, this is how I might write it out. I took Clay and we went out and played basketball. Or we did an activity where each of us were asking questions of each other, and we got to realize the need that Clay has and that he wants to work on. Right? So that would be the note. But as I'm doing that, it's helping me gain information to help Clay go to mom and dad and say, okay, this is the need. But maybe the next time I go and I talk to mom, and I work with mom, and mom and I talked about her frustration with Clay and how she can better support him in his basketball or whatever it is. Does that make sense? So we write our notes according to how it's benefiting the youth, if that makes sense. Services are focused on the benefit of the youth, but often meetings happen with parents and caregivers. If the youth are old enough, I invite them to the meeting as well. Nothing about you without you. That goes for youth as well. Meetings don't often take place with the youth individually if he or she is under the age of 16. Sometimes they do, depending on the family and like what you're working on. But once again, goes back to ethics, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But services are focused on benefiting the identified youth, but we often do this through meeting with the caregiver. Primary caregivers often have mental health or substance use issues of their own. Services can also be targeted toward benefiting the caregiver as long as they offer benefits toward the youth as well. So when I work with mom about how she's reacting to her kids, when her kids come and talk to her, I'm working with mom, but does that benefit the kids? Absolutely, right? The kids then are like, whoa, what just happened to mom? Like, that's different. So it shifts things up, but mom's learning how to better herself, and in turn, it's benefiting her kids. So then there's temporary caregivers. Those include foster parents, proctor parents, kinship, and sometimes family friends. Even when you're working with temporary caregivers, your services are still targeted toward the youth, but you still will work with those temporary caregivers. And a lot of times I had some kids that were in foster care, but we brought mom to those meetings. We involved mom in those meetings because reunification was the goal. So we work with the temporary caregiver, we work with mom, and we work with the youth, so that they're all on the same page and the goals that we're working on benefit all of them. Often solutions and services targeted toward temporary caregivers are time-limited or short-term solutions. Okay, siblings. Siblings sometimes are my favorite to work with because siblings tend to see like all the nitty-gritty worst in their sibling, right? They are overly positive. They're mad at mom and dad because mom and dad spend so much time talking to this kid and helping this kid and everything else. And so, what about me? Right? So, siblings are often present with individual issues of their own apart from the identified youth. Services toward the caregiver can benefit the siblings as well as the identified youth. Siblings are often overlooked in the implementation of care by both professionals and caregivers. And so it's important to remember that sometimes, like, there are some great professionals out there who do include, and it's amazing. But a lot of times they are overlooked. And that can create issues with that child in the present or even down the road.
Do you think that's a symptom of caseload and how we're overworked in the field? Adding one more person becomes difficult.
Yes, it could be. Yes. So siblings often can be put at risk by identified youth. So just being aware of the safety considerations that are there and making sure that the family as a whole is safe. The youth is safe, but the family is safe. So what we've just talked about is looking at the whole family. We're taking a whole family approach, and so we have this youth that struggles. They're having a rough time right now. But we turn around and we say, okay, youth is struggling, but let's look. So is mom. Mom's, so I will speak from experience for myself. So my children struggled, but so did mom. So I have my son, and I have mom who's struggling with postpartum depression after delivering a stillborn. And dad is struggling because dad doesn't know how to support mom, and the business isn't going very well, so dad's struggling on edge. And then we have older brother who, he's upset because he's not getting the support from family and school, so he starts failing classes. Younger sister just attaches herself to mom, and mom's kicking her and being like, just give me some space, leave me alone. Like, we walk into families like that, but you walk in as a peer support and they're like, hey, how are you? Oh, everything's good. We're okay, right? Jace is having a struggle right now. And, you talk and you focus on that child, but once you start talking, you really discover that there's things with the whole family that they can work on together to benefit the youth. And that's where listening, I love to listen. I'm not a huge interrupter when people are talking because I want to listen. And the more I sit there and listen, I don't let silence get to me. I'm okay. I'll sit there and let it be silent for a minute, and they'll start to talk again. And so when we look at all of the people who influence the family, grandparents, friends, neighbors, everything, when we look at that and we start to pull people in to support, pretty soon things start to change for that family. They realize that they're not alone in that process, that this youth who's struggling has a really good friend whose dad he really likes and who he'll sit and talk to. Well, maybe we invite that dad to family meetings, and he can work and support on the same goals that we're working on. And so family peer support and adult peer support is we wrap around the whole family. And we involve anybody that the family's willing to let us involve. We take the direction from the family's in the driver's seat, just like adult peer support is, right? They know their own answers. So we're just gonna let them talk, we're gonna ask questions, and we're gonna encourage. So when we work with families as well, resiliency versus recovery. So resiliency is a process of adapting to difficult, challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Okay, so basically, resiliency is goals for family and youth. Because we're adapting, it's a process of adapting. Recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So recovery is goals for individuals. Resiliency is what we strive for with families. Because families change so much. There is so much change going on in families that it's hard to set a recovery goal with a youth when in 2 years or even a year, their life is going to look so much different because of, sorry, I gotta grab this mic. Because of influences, friends, school. So resiliency is what we look for with families. Recovery is what adults work towards because there's not as much change. I mean, there is change, but it's easier for an adult to experience change and keep that change, even though other factors are coming in. Okay, so let's move on to our ethics really quick. So, actually, I'm gonna just tell me. I'm gonna skip ahead really quick. Okay. Oh, never mind. I took this one out. I was gonna do a word clock, but I took it out. So tell me what words you think of when you hear the word ethics. I heard one in the hall. Somebody said, ethics, boring. Right? I heard somebody say that as they turned around and didn't want to walk in. Because it's boring. That's how people think. What else? What other words? Morals.
Integrity. Based on the social context.
Okay.
Integrity.
Yeah. Any other words? Hey, there's a whole bunch up here, right? Boundaries. That's a great one. So, ethics might be boring. We might not like to talk about them, but ethics is what drives our work. Ethics are what protect us in the work that we do. The work that we do as peers is so different than other professionals and the work that other professionals do. And so we develop that deeper connection with people, which can present opportunities to cross boundaries and be in situations that might not be ethical. And so that's why it's important just to remind ourselves of ethics and what they are and to think through it so that it's on our mind so that we can be aware and be prepared, right? If knowledge is power. So you have the knowledge, you've thought through ethical situations, and then when you're in that situation, you have the power to be like, no, I set a boundary, or my moral is this, or I value this, and so you already know the answer. So it becomes easier in that moment. Ethics also keep us from burning out. It's really, really easy as a peer to get to burnout mode if you're not setting boundaries and if you're putting yourself in fix-it situations, right, where you have to do it all. Okay, so what is an ethical dilemma? Does anybody?
You got two choices that ethical decision is not entirely clear.
Yeah. I would say a majority of my time as a peer support is spent in ethical dilemmas. Like there are some pretty clear ones that I'm like, yeah, this is for sure a no, but I spend a lot of time between the doors going, okay, what do I do in this situation, right? And every time I train my peers, I tell them, listen to your gut, follow your gut. Trust your instinct, trust your morals, trust your values. And if you are looking internally at what you value and where your morals lie and what just the strengths that you trust in yourself, you're gonna make the right decision. Right? And if it happens to be, maybe you look back and you're like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. You did the best that you could in that situation. You talk to your supervisor and you work through that process and you come up with a plan if you're in a situation that happens again. But I promise you, 99% of the time, if you trust your gut, you will stay on the ethical path. And you'll be protecting yourself and the agency and the family that you work with. Everybody will be safe. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Just remembering that we're in a professional role. We are not in a friendly friend role. And sometimes that's hard as peer supports because we develop those deep connections and we want to be friends, right? They tend to rely on us. And so as a peer, that's why it's super important to make sure you're involving other natural supports. Because if you're not involving natural supports, when you're out of the picture, who do they have to turn to? Not a single person, right? So, yeah.
So I just in the chat, so setting healthy boundaries.
Yes, setting healthy boundaries. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Because boundaries are super important. I learned that the hard way. Yep. We all do, right? So, there's a difference between ethics and boundaries. So, boundaries are guidelines and rules that keep us safe. Ethics are our morals and our values. And we want to make sure that we are clear on what those are. I share my boundaries with every family I work with. Very first meeting, I type up my boundaries. I have them all typed up. I print them off, and I share my boundaries with the family. So that the family knows that I am there for them and I will support them. But these are my boundaries. When I am with my family, and it's after work or it's a weekend, I am with my family 100% of the time. I give 100% focus to my family. When I'm with them and I'm supporting them, they get 100% of my focus and my attention. And so it really helps to keep me out of some situations where I might be tempted to pick up my phone and be like, hey, what's going on? Because I did that, and it was a little rough. I had unhappy children, I had an unhappy husband, I was burned out, I spent a lot of time in tears, and so finally when I wrote the boundaries and I shared them with my supervisor, I shared them with my family, I shared them with the families I supported, my kids would look at it and go, Mom, they pull my boundaries out and be like, your work phone's supposed to be put away. I'm like, oh yeah, let me turn that off and go put it in my bedroom, right? So they would remind me. And I think it's a great way to help keep balance between work and home, and focusing on ourselves, that self-care, and focusing on those that we love. Okay, so pull out your phones and scan this QR code. And I want you to choose the action that you feel is usually ethical. So giving a small gift, sexual relationship with a family member of a peer, telling a youth they should go to college, helping a peer plan how to talk to the team about not taking medications. Which one is usually ethical? Okay. So you can still go ahead and answer, but we're going to talk about this for a second. So choose the action you feel is usually ethical. So most of you said helping a peer plan how to talk to the team about not taking medications. What makes that statement ethical?
It's driven by the individual, and it's in job description. We're supposed to advocate, and we're supposed to help our clients plan to be self-advocates.
Right.
That's the only one on there that fits that definition.
Right. Helping a peer plan how to talk to the team. Okay? That, and I put usually, but that's always going to be an ethical choice, right? So we have some telling a youth they should go to college. Why is that not usually?
Because that's your support, you don't direct decisions.
Right.
Now, if
Right.
you come to me and say, I want to go to college, can we look at the process? That's different.
That is a different angle. That absolutely would become ethical if they came to you and said, I want to go to college, right? So, but us telling a family member or an individual or a youth that they should go to college, right? Brainstorm with them. Come up with different ideas. You, as a peer, sometimes I would throw out ideas in that brainstorming process, but they were simply ideas that got written down, and then the youth and family got to choose.
They were, how do you feel about this
Yep.
option? Questions.
Yep. So, giving a small gift, don't give gifts. Sexual relations with a family member or peer, never ethical. Okay, so here's another one. Choose the action you feel is usually ethical. Friending a peer on Facebook, describing your culture and identity, asking a youth to babysit, telling a child their parents are too strict. Okay, so let's talk about this one really quick. Describing your culture and identity. What makes that ethical?
So you're going to be very connected with your parents. It's your experience.
Yeah, it's your experience. It's a connection point. If I'm not willing to be vulnerable and share with the families that I'm working with, what makes me think that they're going to trust me
It also
enough to
allows
share?
the clients to make an informed decision.
Right.
Like, so I tell you who I am and what my philosophy is on what we're doing, and just like shopping therapists, if that's not going to fit, you can go elsewhere.
Right. I they can fire me here anytime. I've never had anybody fire me though, so
But it's
hopefully
about
that's what I say.
client empowerment.
Right, but it is, yes, it is family empowerment. Okay, telling a child their parents are too strict. I've wanted to tell more than one kid that their parent is too strict before. But that is not ethical.
We're getting into that relationship instead of empowering the child to be a self-advocate.
Right,
We're cutting out the potential for the communication.
right.
And it can
Between
be
them and their
viewed,
parents.
it can be viewed as a bias. 'Cause
Yep.
maybe to another person that might not.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, we're telling them, we're
Yep.
not helping them come to their
Yep.
own conclusion.
You're right.
We're supposed to be like connecting these people, not
Yeah. And anytime that we tell something, especially when it comes to relationships, that's exactly what you're doing. Is you're putting a bigger wedge in between those family members and those individuals that you're working with. Friending your
The peer said I'm right.
yeah, right. Friending a peer on Facebook, just don't go there.
I know our ethical guidelines are not the same as NASW, but NASW has very specific guidelines on social
Yeah.
media. It's a no-go.
Yes, yes. And asking a youth to babysit, anytime you're inviting a youth to your home to do anything, or a family or an individual,
That's also on the
Yep.
NASW guidelines, so like
yeah,
nothing outside of the professional relationship with it.
yep. Okay, so choose the action you feel is not ethical. Giving out your cell phone number, accepting a gift worth under $10, asking a youth to do work at your home, going to church together. Okay, this is tough, and I'm going to bring something up while you're thinking about this, about dual relationships and those complex relationships that we have with people in our community. So as you're thinking about that, just give that a little bit of thought about dual relationships and
Don't let us multiple check on this one.
no multiple check. And we'll talk about why in just a second. Okay.
All of them, that one's the most clear.
Okay.
And in my agency, number 2, the cell phone number, that's a no-go.
So, okay, so let's talk about, so asking youth to do work at your home, we just talked about that, right? Don't even go there. Like, youth, family member, individual, sorry, I'm family peer support, so you get my, you get my FPSS talk, but youth, individual, it doesn't matter. We're not going to do work, we're not going to invite any family that we work with to our home for any reason. Giving out your cell number. So I worked at an agency that did not provide me with a work phone. So if you work for an agency that doesn't provide a work phone for you, how are you going to be in contact with the families that you work with?
You're going to have to check with your agency for guidelines.
Right, right. So this is one of those yellow areas, right? If we're looking at green is completely ethical, go ahead, do it. Red is no way, under no circumstance. This is where our dilemma comes in to play, right? If you're ever in doubt, check with your agency, check with your supervisor.
My agency gave me an option to just use an email on my cards, or allow me
Right.
to provide my phone number.
Yeah,
They don't provide me a phone.
yeah,
One thing we've done is, at our agency is set up Google numbers there.
Yep.
Just for that.
Yep.
We never give out our personal numbers.
That's what we do in ours too, but it's kind of weird because
hard to switch out.
Sometimes it's hard. We did get Google numbers as well, but sometimes it's hard to make that switch a difference. So accepting a gift worth under $10, sometimes that's the family's culture. Giving a gift is the culture that the family has. So my rule of thumb was, and as I talked to my supervisor in the agency, we would accept a gift if it was something that we could take back and share. A picture that we could hang on the wall in the office so everybody could see it. A bowl of fresh fruit off the tree we take to the office and put it out so that everybody enjoys that. It's not a gift coming directly to me. So once again, check, but, and going to church together, small communities, sometimes even not small communities, that's just not something that you can help. But being clear on what your boundaries are, and
I'm
what
not
you'll do.
picking the kid up as we're going to the congregation. If they happen to be part of the
Right.
same congregation.
Right.
I've done peer work where that was actually, could be part of your job, because it was peer connection.
Right. And sometimes
it's
you
a
can't.
resource for them.
Right.
And if you are available for that, you are allowed to offer that connection and resource with them.
Right.
So it depends on your agency.
Right.
And it depends on your.
Yep. So just remember, there's a lot of yellow. There's a lot of yellow. But just make the best decision that you can in the moment. And check with your supervisor if you have a chance before. If you don't, trust your gut. Right, so just remember that friends, if you are a friend, your decision only affects you and the other person. Being a peer, your decision is going to affect the friend, the agency, the collaborative partners. It may result in a financial loss. It may result in criminal, civil liability. So just be aware that it doesn't just affect you when you're working with families. Oh, I was choosing the blazer. Okay. Boundaries, we talked about this already. Dual relationships, value conflicts, playing the hero, role shifts. It's hard to maintain boundaries. Be clear on your boundaries. Be clear on what your morals and values are, and it will keep you ethically safe. Right? So, yeah, thank you guys for coming to the boring ethics class. I hope it wasn't too boring. But I'm super excited to see the work that you do and to run into you and